So this hive is really strong for the time of year. So here we are again, early March. And this hive already filled up both of their deep boxes. By the way, this is one of those new Propola boxes. We're going to check that out once we go through this hive. They've already filled up both their boxes, and we needed to add another box. Now, this is a great problem, but it causes a lot of confusion for a lot of beekeepers. You know, when is it time to add another box? When you add another box, should it be a honey super? Should it be a brood box? You know, there's a lot of questions around when is it time to add honey supers. So here's my rule of thumb. I'm not adding honey supers. I'm not adding boxes that I expect to harvest honey out of until I see major nectar producing flowers starting to bloom. Now, in most areas in the US, you know, unless you're, you know, again in Florida or something, most areas of the US, that's not until at the very earliest, you know, down by the Gulf Coast, you might be looking at, you know, April, perhaps. Most areas, you know, it starts more like May as you get further from the Gulf Coast, or even, you know, May or June as you go further north. So it's very, very rare, almost non-existent in the United States, that you would be adding honey supers to harvest honey from in March. That essentially doesn't exist. So if your hive is really, really packed full of bees, then you can add boxes, but it's really to give the bees more room to stall until it is time to harvest honey, or to put honey supers on. So when I have a hive like this that already has 2 brood boxes, if both of those brood boxes are 90 to 100% full of bees in March, yes, I'm going to add another box to help prevent them from swarming and to let them continue to grow. And then I'm probably going to split this hive in early April as soon as I can get queens and grow more bees. But you've got to do something to prevent them from swarming, because they certainly will swarm in March or April if they run out of room and you can't make a split. So this top box is pretty full of bees. So we added a box. Now, if you're adding a box, it can be a medium box, that's fine. It can be a deep box. Either way, adding a box to give them room is fine. Now, one thing I actually recommend is if you're adding a box simply to prevent swarming, contrary to what I did here, I would add the empty box at the very bottom of the hive. It really shuts down a hive's swarming tendency if they have empty space between the bottom board and the bottom box. So this medium box we added, next time I would add it between this bottom box and the bottom board. And that, again, really, really tends to shut down that swarming tendency. But I just want to take a look at this hive with you really quickly to show you, you know, this top box is pretty much full of bees, and the bottom box is also full of bees. So, you know, when hives are this full, this early in the season, you've got to do something in order to keep them from swarming, and adding that box to the bottom is my preferred method to prevent that this time of year. Now, you can also take brood from a really strong hive like this, and you can give that brood to weaker hives, and that certainly is an option to slow down this hive's growth and boost up the strength of other hives. Now in this hive, you know, we have a lot going on. So beautiful frame of pollen. There's so much pollen, they don't even hardly have room for brood. So you can see you've got this little compact patch of brood up here, and everything else is just pollen, which is beautiful. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, this time of year, I'm wanting to see lots of pollen. Now, the other cool thing is this hive is already rearing a lot of drones. Woo! Sorry, girls. So you can see we've got a ton of brood, beautiful compact brood patterns here. It's what I want to see this time of year. A lot of brood, a lot of cap brood. I'm not seeing a lot of honey, and that's something you really have to watch out for this time of year, because when they grow so much, I mean, this hive is just growing like crazy. They've got many frames just completely full of brood like this. They can go through a tremendous amount of food in a very short period of time. And there's not a lot of nectar producing flowers blooming yet. So they're usually growing at a rate faster than they can bring in nectar. So unless they had a lot of stores of honey in the hive coming out of winter, they are going to be getting pretty hungry. I mean, this top box probably only weighs 10 pounds. And so I am definitely going to be feeding this hive probably a gallon of syrup, 1-to-1 syrup every week, just to make sure I keep up with their needs as they grow. I got to show you this just because it's what I love about this time of year. Look at this frame. Now I know that sun's kind of going down, so it's getting hard to see. This is a frame completely full of pollen, just an entire frame of pollen. And that's, to me, just so beautiful. I mean, that is what we want to see this time of year, just hives bringing in tons of pollen. They're usually bringing in a whole lot more pollen than they are nectar, which is why we often have to step in and do some feeding. But again, a hive like this, that's growing this fast, keep an eye on the feed, keep an eye on the space, and then again, take some of those frames of brood, pass it off to weaker hives to keep this one from swarming until you get queens to make splits.